Welcome again to this to this platform on belonging. And I know Joan delivered a really beautiful and insightful program last week, investigating an aspect of this subject. And so I want to examine something else. And the questions I always start off, or so it's important for me as a grounding exercise to start off with questions. And I think the questions that undergird this platform are: can I be held here? Can I be seen here? And will I offer space to the lonely, the exiled, the hurt? And what is the relationship that emerges from an openness to the other? This, in a way, I hope introduces my approach to exploring ethical culture and sifting through what we're trying to do here as a community. And as someone who's been uh, entrusted as a caretaker to this peculiar tradition, speaking of ethical culture, that was birthed some miles away, I think it's an important undertaking and really meaningful for me. So today I want to try to offer an understanding of my process that I've come to think about what it means to offer belonging as a way of being, as a way of being in the world. I posit that there are three important steps to embodying belonging in the world. It's one, honoring one's own vulnerability to loneliness and isolation. The second is crafting or leaving space for potential of what an other has to offer. And then lastly, it's weaving through relationship the things that we learn and we share and we learn, um, and see what fruit comes to bear. Even though I would argue that the fruit is the relationship. So in my humble opinion, no one wants to be alone. While everyone deserves solitude, and social obligation these days can be stressful, difficult, and sometimes expensive to uphold, experiencing isolation has a negative social and health impact on our lives. But we are bound to experience isolation at some point. We are bound to suffer in that way. And in that, uh, owning that and accepting that, I feel is the first seed in our general calling to offer belonging. The threat of isolation, of loneliness, is something we as humans share. And because of this, the extension of space seems like a logical next step. The extension of space for an other is somewhat basic obligation to not to or effort or some kind of thing to put forward to try to not reenact the pain we know or fear on another. And finally, once we offer that space, something hopefully happens. Our invitation is accepted. Our space becomes fuller, more resonant. We grow. This happens through relationship. So I delivered a platform that asks, can I be Black and humanist? And I'm not sure if I delivered it here. I think I did. I'm almost positive I did. But I realize now that it was that platform was really about the question of belonging and whether I could belong to this movement. You might not notice, but I'm different than most folks in ethical culture. Um, but I asked a while ago, so I had that question, and I realized that question uh, kind of comes from a wound of my own. As a young person, I never quite I felt like I fit in to the Black community. My parents particularly sort of sheltered me from e- engaging with people my own age, my peers. So I never learned the ways I was supposed to be, well, cool. Right? And then I went to a predominantly white school in Manhattan. And even though in ways I felt more comfortable there, the question of whether I belonged in terms of race, in terms of class, was a constant thread through my experience. And this is why I think I extend myself to others. I remember working as a high school mentoring assistant in Southwest Philadelphia, and I met a young woman named Fenta. She was coming into her freshman year in the middle of the year, her first year in high school, in the middle of the year in January, after living most of her childhood in Conakry, Guinea. And she was shy and she spoke very little English, but I was determined to make her mid-year entry as impactful as I could, as comfortable, as welcoming. I remember there was a trip that the mentoring program that I worked with held, and she needed her father's signature. So I remember calling frantically, trying to convince him to come to the school midday to secure his signature. I remember when trying to match her with a mentor, thinking that the English teacher who already had students would be the perfect match for her, offering us social and academic support. I encouraged a young group of folks to start a Pan-African dance group because I knew she loved to dance. And it would help her connect to other African and Caribbean and American students. They never performed, but the times they did share, I remember it had provided a lot of laughs and a little bit of love. And one of the last things I remember from that year was trying to set her up with a summer job and interview. And remember, she got it, but the director of the program couldn't get in contact with her. And she didn't come back to school that year or afterwards. I worried about her for some time, but years later, I found her on Facebook and she ended up in Massachusetts and attended Hampshire College. She now has graduated from Columbia College graduate program with a master's degree in theater, and she's teaching theater in Queens. We catch up every now and then to share poems, ideas, and dreams about the future. It was my job to do those things when she was coming in her ninth grade year, but the care and the attention that came, it came from a recognition of not only her vulnerability, but of her immense potential. And I've tried to carry this ethos everywhere I go. I've tried to expand it in terms of language. It wasn't until living in Ghana, a country where 50 languages are spoken and people typically speak three or more, did I appreciate how important, or rather what it said about who you cared about when you met someone in their mother tongue. I remember the joy of welcome and invitation once people realized I cared about what their greetings were, the names of their food, how they expressed joy, surprise, or approval or disapproval. I wanted to feel that so much, I tried unsuccessfully to learn other languages. I remember greeting a man who was a concrete seller in his tribe, in this other sort of local language of this town. He was shocked and also touched. He said, all these years, no one has tried to greet him in his native tongue, which comes from an ethnic group, though more populous, were politically and economically marginalized regionally by one ethnic group and nationally by another. This convinced me that our capacity to offer belonging is immense. I think it should be a rule. I also think it should be a rule or something we could all commit to learn the second most spoken language in any place we live. But that's, I mean, it's a little demanding. But I think it's possible, or at least to give the attempt. I remember being attracted to ethical culture because I sense a kind of invitation as in, and I understood it as an invitation to be shaped, as an that ethical culture was an ever incomplete morphing project. I remember Hugh Taft Morales, who actually his son went to college with Femta. I remember Hugh Taft Morales saying enthusiastically, "Everyone who becomes a part of ethical culture changes ethical culture." In ways, I've tried to do just that. So, coming from that question of can I be Black and humanist, and being in a position and working towards a position of trying to make that true for myself and other people. It's why I advocate for Toni Morrison's Beloved to be considered of what I call part of the invisible humanist canon. That its investigation of the wounds of slavery on one's understanding of freedom, justice, and love should live rent-free in our community's mind. It is why I incorporate my language of relationship together with the wise teachings of Sebufu Somé in the spirit of intimacy. Sebufu Somé writes about her tribe in Burkina Faso and how they talk about love and how they how they perform the act of love. And she describes love as two people forming one spirit. And that spirit's purpose is to push each person to fulfill their purpose in life and community. My attraction to this thought is not for its metaphysics, though that wouldn't describe that. I don't think that should disqualify it as something meaningful to contribute to our community's understanding of relationship. But the real world practice it provides for us. She speaks of the ways that folks create circles to for whatever bond, so that people are able to bring things into that circle, discuss certain things in that circle, and how those circles allow for sharing and intimacy. And then intentionally maintaining systems of support in relationships. So not only concerned about your partner, but you're concerned about your friends, your family, and they have to be concerned about their friends and their family. And it also honors the individuality in connection. So I make impassioned arguments for these texts and concepts and outlooks to be mentionable in our societies, not just because of my attraction to them, but the possibilities of other folks feeling that their particular guiding philosophies can be legible here, that they can too be seen here. And I think this is only possible if ethical societies in general deem it worthy to take up the mantle of meeting the possible other with an open ear and open heart, and make it clear that there is space for their questions, their unique formed experiences to shape the space, to shape those societies, and become a basis for relationship that is the delicious fruit of these encounters. So this might be an important time to reflect on where our nation is in terms of how we are treating others attempting to live a better life. As one might describe as these encounters, whether it's from folks, their experience at the borders, or the experience of being sent to cities where there's not enough care or housing for them. I wonder how many fences are at the border or in a holding cell. How many of them are waiting to be met with invitation? How many are waiting for a community to help them feel as if they belong? I want to go back to the opening words. I want to go back to the fuller poem because it's beautiful, right? I think that's fair to say. And I tried to have it ready, but somehow that didn't work. All right, I see it. Community means strength by Starhawk. That's the full title of the poem. We are all longing to go home to some place we have never been, a place half remembered and half envisioned. We can only catch glimpses of from time to time. Community. Somewhere there are people to whom we can speak with passion without having to the words catch in our throats. Somewhere a circle of hands will open to receive us. Eyes will light up as we enter. Voices will celebrate with us whenever we come into our own power. Community means strength that joins our strength to do the work that needs to be done. Arms to hold us when we falter. A circle of healing, a circle of friends, somewhere where we can be free. By Starhawk. Say you. Yeah, thank the you. Yeah, for that. Unitarian Universalist folks. It's just because of Pito, I made sure that I wove some in because Pito has been doing some great work around making sure these two communities are talking to each other and sharing, um, creating an inviting space online for folks across the movements. So I really do see that my role as leader is to leave no doubt that you are welcome to this tradition and convincing you that you are essential to shaping it, that your particular questions, skills, and experience inform our evolving project. It changes it. I think it's also my job to make sure it's reflected in the tapestry that results. You can see it so that other people can see it when they come through our doors. They hear how we share. So know you have a home, a place here.